This morning's Gospel leaves behind the account of Jesus' early ministry, which we've been following for this past month. And it takes a giant chronological leap forward to the transfiguration of Christ. It's a milestone in Mark's Gospel, one that points us towards the Passion narrative and a precursor to the glory of the resurrection. It's a reminder of what lies at the end of our Lenten journey, which begins on Wednesday. We won't return to our sequential reading of Mark's Gospel until after Trinity Sunday. So, we heard that amazing story of a mountaintop experience like none other, as Peter, James, and John witnessed something totally unique, an experience that left them trembling. We can sense some of their awe in Peter's babbling response. He wants to do something to mark what has just happened, but he doesn't really know what to say or do. How hard it must have been for him and the other two then to be told by Jesus not to say anything about what they'd seen. Or perhaps it was a relief. After all, how do you start to tell the other disciples, "Hey guys, you'll never guess what happened earlier today"? In preparing for this morning, I was pondering on the fact that this event is always called the Transfiguration of Christ, not the Transformation. In fact, the Greek word used could just as easily be translated either way. Yet, translators always make a point of using the word transfigured. And according to the dictionary, the two words have slightly different meanings or emphases in English. So transformation means a marked change in form, nature, or appearance, a process by which something is converted into something else of similar value. Transfiguration means a complete change of form or appearance into a more beautiful or spiritual state, a metamorphosis, an exalting, glorifying, or spiritual change. So the two words are not totally unalike, but transfiguration emphasizes that this is still Jesus and still identifiable as him. This isn't like John's account of the Easter garden where Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus. Peter, James, and John were not confused. They knew it was Jesus. He looked different, but it was still clearly him. We might say that they saw the real Jesus as he would be seen in God's heavenly kingdom. But he was still the same Jesus they'd walked with up the mountain. Unlike Moses, who radiated the divine glory that shone upon him, Jesus' glory came from within. By the way, since I'm mentioning Moses here, it's probably a good point at which to digress briefly and offer an explanation as to why Moses and Elijah should have appeared with Jesus. Both these prophets had unusual times to their ends on earth. No one knows where Moses was buried. The Old Testament records that he climbed to the top of Mount Nebo, from where he was able to survey the promised land, and there he died according to the word of the Lord. But there is no record of any grave, and some have contended that he never really died, but was swept up into heaven. In 2 Kings chapter 2, the story of Elijah is concluded by him being taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. And it's partly because of the uncertainty surrounding these two patriarchs as to whether they really died or not, that it is said that they will appear again at the end of time. However, the presence of Moses and Elijah besides Jesus is probably best interpreted as indicating that Jesus is the fulfillment of the law which Moses created and the prophets as represented by Elijah. So, back to our thoughts on transfiguration versus transformation. We talk about a transforming faith, a gospel message that transforms its hearers. But what would it mean if we talked in terms of a transfiguring faith? If we were transfigured rather than transformed? We often try to transform ourselves in subtle ways to better meet what society demands of us. Especially in this era of Instagram and selfies, people can be unduly concerned about how they look and the image they project. They try to transform themselves through hair and makeup and the clothes they wear. They try to look younger, more beautiful, more successful. They want the world to think that they've got it all sewn up. Great homes, great children, great relationships, great looks. We put up virtual Zoom backgrounds to hide our less than perfect surroundings. You'll have seen the recent adverts on TV that prey on this very insecurity. But if transformation is about changing or trying to change who we are, then transfiguration, as witnessed by what happened to Jesus, is about becoming more truly ourselves. That is, the selves that God created us to be. For He made us in His image. Living in the light of God doesn't transform us in the ways that I've just been talking about. However, it can and does transfigure us. In God's eyes, and even in the eyes of others, we can be changed. I expect we've all met people who are so full of the love of God that it seems to radiate from them. It has transfigured them. Between Transfiguration, when 3 disciples catch a glimpse of Jesus' glory, and Easter, when the whole community sees his resurrected glory, we get ready. We journey through Lent and prepare ourselves for the joy of Christ's resurrection. But that time of Lenten discipline requires something of us. It's not about reshaping ourselves into something different. It's about letting God buff and polish us so that the light of Christ, which is already present in our lives, is more clearly reflected to the world around us. Perhaps we should stop trying to transform ourselves into the people we think we need to be and embrace who God intends us to be. And in so doing, allow His love to shine through. Peter, James, and John had a mountaintop experience like no other. Mountaintop experiences are wonderful things. In terms of faith, they are those spiritual moments that bring us to our knees in awe. They are the highs that keep us going when life is more ordinary again, when we have to come down off the mountain, because we always do. And though we may leave the mountaintop with a sense of sadness, it's interesting to note that it is in the valley that the grass grows. When Elijah was taken up to heaven, his mantle passed to Elisha. When Moses died, Joshua took up the leadership of the Hebrew people. Jesus passed on the work of the kingdom to his followers, and it is a work which we are still undertaking. In Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, he writes to believers who have experienced the glory of the gospel, whose hearts shine with it. But the message is still veiled to many. And Paul urges his readers to let their light shine so that others might see clearly. Can we live in such a way that our lives are transfigured to reflect the glory of God, to be more fully what God has created us to be, to work that the world itself might be transfigured, that it might become a kingdom of justice and peace, where the voice of the oppressed is heard, where the poor are liberated from poverty, where there is no more disease? Can we imagine that? Can we live accordingly? Peter, James, and John went up the mountain with Jesus and they saw him transfigured. They literally saw him in a new light. We are called to reflect the presence of Christ within us, that others might see us in a new light. And in doing so, be drawn to the one whose love transfigures us. As we approach Lent, my prayer for us all is that the glory of Christ on the mountaintop might illuminate his presence in our lives, that we may show his love in our living, so that the light of the gospel might shine out to the world and transfigure it. Amen.